Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was released in 2003. Developed by BioWare, they would go on to create other classic titles such as the Mass Effect and Dragon Age games. BioWare managed to take the beloved Star Wars IP and intertwine it with RPG elements. Nowadays, people often look back at KOTOR with fond memories, and many agree it is one of the best Star Wars single-player games. I want to revisit KOTOR, but with a twist. Our very own blaster challenge. Let's jump straight into the rules. Starting off, I'm only allowed to use blasters. There are plenty of blasters such as rifles, pistols, LMGs, and other ranged weaponry. This will be interesting to try since we will be really ineffective against force users and melee users. Because blasters are the only things that can be used, grenades, melee weapons, and damaging force powers cannot be used. Now there will be an exception to force powers. We are allowed to use them, but they must be non-damaging. For instance, various healing powers and buffs are allowed. We'll talk about this more throughout the run. The game must be played on the difficult difficulty, which is equivalent to hard mode in other games. The difficulty cannot be changed during the run. Next, we must beat the game. KOTOR has many planets and things to do on each one, so we will have to conquer each challenge. Lastly, glitches and or exploits are allowed, so expect some cheeky ways to take down bosses and get around areas. KOTOR is such an awesome game, and I'm so excited to play this again while sharing it with everyone. Let me know down below if you'd like to see more KOTOR content in the future. One quick thing I want to mention is that I will be showcasing the challenge alongside the story in this video. This is meant for those who are unfamiliar to the game and its storyline. A couple of years ago, I actually played KOTOR 1 and 2 for the first time, and was extremely happy I wasn't spoiled the story beforehand. Because of this, I feel it would make the video much more interesting to talk about the story and challenge side by side. Make sure to smash the like button, comment, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Without further ado, let's get into the run. We start the run by selecting and customizing our character. I decided to go with the soldier class since it had better stats for a blaster build. Then I chose the face of our protagonist, and for some reason this one just kind of looked like Kanan from Rebels, so I went with him. Waking up on the Endar Spire, we realize that the ship is under attack from the Sith. Trask is our bunkmate and shares what happened. Kind of funny, but Trask is also the tutorial for the player. It's super funny to hear him ramble to me about using the various buttons and what each one does. Grabbing our equipment, we head into battle. Getting a small taste of what's to come, we learn the combat in the game. Essentially, KOTOR is a turn-based game where each side has different abilities depending on their weaponry. For instance, if the player has a blaster, they are able to use rapid fire or sniper shot abilities to get extra damage, or a better chance of hitting the target. Each has their ups and downs, but generally is better than the normal attacks. At the end of the ship, after battling countless enemies and losing our bunkmate Trask, we connect with Karth Onasi. He tells us the ship is falling apart and we need to use the escape pod now. Eventually we crash land on Terrace, a Sith-occupied world. Afterwards, we receive some strange visions of a Jedi and a Sith fighting each other. What could this mean? Is this some sort of random dream, or perhaps something else? Well, let's continue going through the game and seeing if there are other clues or hints. Talking with Karth after waking up reveals a few things. We learn a bit about the state of Terrace since the Sith started ruling over, alongside the interrogation techniques that Dark Jedi employ. Now, I want to showcase one of the best aspects of this game, which is the various dialogue options. For those who have played the Mass Effect and the BioWare games, this will be very familiar. When talking to NPCs, there are various dialogue options that can be chosen, but generally there is a good, neutral, and evil choice. Depending on the player's actions, this will give the player items, money, or possibly nothing. In this example, I got light side points by defeating the people harassing the man, then more light side points for paying off his debts. Now this is one scenario, and there are hundreds throughout the game. So if you're interested in seeing more, check out the VODs channel where I post full streams and challenges. Entering the medical facility, we speak with the overseer and he reveals this terrible disease. Rat ghoul disease is mostly in the lower areas of Terrace, but causes the person to turn into this horrific creature. After speaking with him and his scummy assistant, they both want us to find a rat ghoul serum, but for different reasons. The overseer wants to help the common man and woman and rid the disease from Terrace. His assistant, on the other hand, wants to overprice the heck out of the serum, resulting in very few receiving it. We will have to keep an eye out and look for clues regarding the serum. Heading into the upper level cantina, we find that there is a dueling ring where players are fighting things out for rewards. The announcer and the atmosphere of the cantina is really well done, and I felt very immersed. Going through the various fights, we take each one down. I ended up losing to Marl because he was using a melee weapon that just two-shotted me. So yeah, we are going to need to come back. Heading into the lower levels of Terrace, we find that the various gangs here are at war with one another. Unfortunately for us, we are caught right in the crossfire, so we gotta take them down. Having just myself and Karth has been a bit tough. It'll be awesome once we get a third ally. In the lower level of Cantina, we meet Mission Vow and Zalbar, an interesting duo. Mission is a techie genius, while Zalbar is a Wookiee warrior. These two are important to the story, but for now we will have to keep investigating Terrace. Nearby to the two of them is a hut, and here bounties can be turned in for rewards. One of the more important targets is Bendik Starkiller, a fierce Mandalorian who fights in the dueling arena. We will have to find some way to claim his bounty. Entering the Hidden Beck base, one of the various gangs on Terrace, we speak with their leader. Asking where Bastila is, alongside gaining knowledge about the planet, we learn that the opposing gang is holding her hostage, and they believe her to only be a Republic officer, not a Jedi. Cutting a deal with Gadden, the Hidden Beck leader, we accept him sponsoring us in the swoop race competition, and if we win, rescue Bastila. First though, Gadden asks us to recover a prototype swoop accelerator if we want his help. Going into the Undercity, one of the lowest levels of Terrace, we find a village of some people. Some of these people were talking about a supposed promised land. Speaking with the various NPCs, we get a better understanding of the harsh reality here. People are forced to stay down here, not allowed to go up the elevator. With famine and Rakul disease running rampant, it is far from paradise. Talking with one of the people in the village, he speaks more about the promised land and journals pertaining to its location. For now, we will have to put this on the back burner. Further into the Undercity, we find a Sith patrol looking for more remains of escape pods, and plenty of Rakuls. Once we take down a large group of them, we search for the nearby area and find one of the corpses having the Rakul serum. Now by this point you might have noticed that we have another ally, which is Mission Vow, the Twi'lek we met earlier. She was with Zalbar the Wookiee when he was captured by Gamorrean enslavers. She pleaded with us to save him and we agreed. Heading into the sewers, we battle Gamorreans and Rakuls. This is a good time to describe the leveling system in this game. Similarly with games of this type, the player is able to level strength, dexterity, intelligence, and so on. Each one has different benefits for different builds. Strength is usually good for melee weapons, while dexterity is good for blasters. Next, the player can level up abilities. These can be things such as Sniper Shot, Rapid Fire, or Power Blast to increase damage or possibly increase the chances of hitting the target. Lastly, the player can upgrade Force abilities. This is a bit later on, once the player arrives on Dantooine. We'll want to mention it now. Rescuing Zalbar from the Gamorreans, we eventually find a Rancor guarding the area we need to get into. While I tried so many times using different strategies to get around him, it was not successful. The best attempt I had was when I stealthed with Mission, but then I had to fight enemies I didn't have the health nor the damage for. Next I was like, okay, let's just try killing the Rancor. Well, for some reason I couldn't get any damage on him. So yeah, this is one of the only places in the game where I actually had to use something other than blasters. Now it is rather unfortunate that the game makes us use a grenade, but this was one of, if not the only time in the game where I was forced to use something else. Let me know down below if there's another way to get around the Rancor that doesn't involve grenades, as I'm really curious to know. Entering the Vulkars base, we battle with droids and various mercenaries. There was this funny moment when I went to fight some turrets. My player in Mission just got insta-killed, so I just had to dip away with Karth. At the end of the base, we talk with Candon Ark, one of the Vulkars' leaders, who tries to swindle us to turn on Gadden. Telling him we won't turn on Gadden, a fight breaks loose, and it actually did not go that well. I had to do a bit of cheesing since my character and Mission both fell in battle. At the end, and randomly on the ground, is the prototype soup accelerator. Returning to the Undercity camp, we give the villagers all of the Promised Land journals. After speaking with the leader of the village, all of them set off for the long and tiring journey ahead of them. Ultimately, we receive a large amount of experience and light side points. In the lower levels, we return the prototype swoop accelerator, and Gadden is true to his word, sponsoring us in the swoop race. The next day, we enter the swoop race competition. I have to say, the swoop races are an amazing aspect of this game, and something I enjoy doing whenever I play KOTOR. The basic gist of swoop racing is that the player needs to get to the end as fast as possible. There are various obstacles that will hinder the player. There are also boost pads that will increase your speed. In the end, we beat the swoop races, but Brejik, the leader of the Vulkars, comes to say that we were cheating. A brawl breaks out, and it's shown that Bastila, even with a neural disruptor on her, was powerful enough to overcome it. Since we are not able to control Bastila and choose her weapons, we will not count this against us, since it's out of our control. After this point anyways, she only uses blasters. Having another dream or premonition, we wake and find Bastila, Karth, Mission, and Zalbar, wondering what to do next. All of us talk about a game plan, then go back into Terrace's streets doing a few things. First, we go back to the medical facility and give him the Rakul serum, thus making it extremely cheap and easy for the average Terrace citizen to use. Once completed, we receive a large amount of light side points. Second, we talk with Canderous Ordo, one of the various mercenaries working for Davik. He saw us beat the swoop race competition and wanted to get off the planet. Since the planet is Sith enforced and has a planetary law where people can't leave, this made people antsy. We eventually agreed to Canderous' deal, but first we gotta finish some other loose ends. Going back into the dueling arena, we fight Mara once again. This was easily one of the toughest since he could just two-shot me with his melee weapon. Which was last. He's the trigger-happy Rhodian that uses dual blasters. Making sure to play things cautiously, we take both of them down, becoming the dual arena champion. Or did we? Well, we may have one more opponent down the line. Breaking into the Sith base in order to get the planetary codes to leave, we come across the Sith governor. This dude was just a taste of the difficulty we will face throughout the run, and just like the sliverest of tastes. It took multiple attempts to take him down because he was just relentless and dealt insane damage. Ultimately, we take down the governor and now the codes needed to leave the planet. Bendak Starkiller is the true final duel in the arena. He came back after taking a break and wanted in on the arena fights. He took a break since no other duelist gave him any trouble, and then once he heard about us destroying the competition, came back for some more fun. I have to say, this was a bit difficult. Didn't help that like every 5 seconds he would stun lock me, so I couldn't really do anything. Well, attempt after attempt, I eventually got this. It was a bit of luck with skill, I think, but nonetheless I was happy to take him down. Talking with Canderous, we accept his offer to escape the planet using the codes he mentioned. We see then a quick cutscene with Darth Malak and General Saul. Malak, impatient with a search for Bastila, orders Terrace to be bombarded with cannon fire. We find and steal the Ebon Hawk. We had to steal it from Davik, who is fiercely protected by Calo Nord, a famous bounty hunter. Escaping the planet, we witness the destruction the Sith fleet have caused and also get chased by various fighters. Escaping Malak and the Sith fleet, we go to Dantooine and find a Jedi enclave. Speaking with the Jedi Masters, they discuss the player's special case. Bastila and the Jedi Masters at this enclave believe us to be Force sensitive. Kind of funny, but Master Vandar, the dude that looks like Yoda, talks normally, so it looks like Yoda talks funny just because he wants to.
Agree with Master Dorak. Many of our own pupils are leaving the Jedi Order.
The council then discusses Revan and if he's truly dead and the implications if he should return. We have another Force dream or premonition, this time with Darth Revan and Malak, searching for some type of ancient artifact. It is interesting since this appears to be when both were still part of the Jedi Order, but left to seek greater power. This must have been one of the first steps they took on their Sith journey. Returning to the Jedi Masters, they say we will start training at once in order to prepare ourselves for entering the ancient ruins seen in the dream or premonition. We get to witness this really cool montage that the game whips up for us, showing how over the course of a couple weeks, we have really understood the Force enough for us to become apprentice. The first test is understanding the Jedi Code. This means understanding the core tenets of what it is to be a Jedi. The second test, well, it isn't important for the challenge since we will be building and crafting a lightsaber, but is necessary to progress the story. The Jedi will not be happy to know that I sold it shortly after to the merchant nearby. The third and final challenge is that we must confront the darkness within ourselves. The Jedi asks us to investigate and cleanse the dark side from the nearby grove. With that, we head off outside the Jedi Enclave. Coming across various beasts, we swiftly take them down. By this point, we have plenty of shields which can help reduce damage, though they have limited duration and only 5 uses. Further into Dantooine's landscape, we find the dark side taint that has been infecting the nearby area. Juhani is a fallen Jedi, and this test is meant to see if we are able to bring her back into the light. Well, this fight took a lot of tries, and a lot is an understatement. What made it difficult is that I had to solo her fight. Well, she has a lightsaber and numerous Force abilities. Thankfully, I found a decent strategy, which was just buffing myself to an absurd level, then taking her on. Around 1/4 health, she will stop fighting and we can talk with her. This part, the player needs to talk with Juhani in a very specific way, otherwise she will flip out and the player will have to start the dialogue anew, which is kind of a pain. Going into a nearby cave, we find Kinrath creatures alongside crystal structures. Looting these will yield lightsaber crystals, which isn't the most useful since we aren't using lightsabers, but we are able to sell them for a good return. Back at the Jedi Enclave, Master Vandar is pleased to see Juhani has returned. Speaking with Master Zar, he congratulated us on fully joining the Jedi Order. With our training completed, our task is now to investigate the ancient ruins where Darth Revan and Malak were spotted. Before we go into the ancient ruins, I want to mention a way of increasing the player's damage and defense. On the Ebon Hawk, in various places throughout the game, the player can find workbenches. Here, melee, lightsaber, and ranged weapons can be upgraded alongside armor. Upgrades can range from increasing damage to critical hit multipliers or critical hit immunity on armor. The options are are plentiful, so make sure to explore around collecting the various components. Sooner or later, we enter the ancient ruins and find a droid. The droid talks about the ancient builders and the vast empire they had. Older than the Republic itself, the builders were technologically advanced, building amazing structures and devices. Unfortunately, they disappeared with little records of their existence. That is why the main characters are so confused. Going through the various side passages, we have to fight droids and solve puzzles. The droids were actually tough and took a while to defeat. The puzzles, well, they were fairly simple, and so we reached what Darth Revan and Malak sought after pretty easily. The star map is a partial map, and something the Dark Lords were very interested in. Seeing other worlds on the star map, this seems to tell us to find the other maps if we are to uncover the Star Forge and its true purpose. Talking with Master Vandar again, he instructs Bastila, the player, and our allies to search for the remaining map fragments. Our first stop in finding the various star maps starts on Manan. We learn that the Sith and the Republic are both here to farm KOTOR, a healing agent that only forms on this planet. Because of this, the Selkath remain neutral in order to benefit from both parties. Talking with the Republic Embassy, we find ourselves in a similar situation to Terrace, where we need to help each other in order to progress. Roland Wand, the embassy leader, says that he might know of where the star map is, but we need to enter the Sith Embassy to recover their probe droid. Entering the Sith base requires the player to do something beforehand in order to gain access. There are a few options to choose from, but I went with the interrogation option since I figured this would be the easiest. Well, it wasn't all that easy, but it was fairly manageable once I understood what was needed. Entering the Sith Embassy, we are greeted with a warm welcome of blaster fire and death. Yeah, this area was a pain to get through. It's crazy to think of how simple this was compared to some of the later game areas. Taking down a bunch of Sith troopers and officers, we progress through. Eventually though, we come across multiple Dark Jedi, and dear god, these enemies were insanely difficult. A lot of lightsaber strikes deal massive damage. And then that's on top of the Sith having insane area of effect force abilities like lightning or force siphon. Needless to say, I spent a ton of time in this area, slowly going through it. At the end, we find the probe droid the Republic Embassy talked about, so we quickly make our way out. This is a good point to mention a few things regarding the game. This is a really old game, as mentioned in the introduction and seen with the game not going to the borders of the screen. Well, the player needs to manually save each time. Now there is an autosave mechanic, but I find it to save rarely and it would be quite buggy. This is both good and bad. The upside is that I can save at opportune times and then continue on from that point. The downside is that I have to save often. If I don't save and die, I have to start from the last save, which depending on when I last saved can be really tough. Though it can be tedious to save, I actually do enjoy it a fair amount, and thankfully this run I didn't have too many crashes. The previous time I actually played through KOTOR, I had so many crashes, like once every couple of hours. Next, we go to a local shop and find it's actually a swoop race tournament. I was really excited since I remember there were a few of these scattered on different planets and wanted to conquer each one of them. The first two were actually straightforward and simple. These took maybe 1 to 2 tries. The final race, oof, oh my gosh, was it rough. For masochists, this would be the perfect event for you. Jokes aside, this was really tough, but one thing I would highly recommend to make it more manageable is to save before your first race, then save once you beat another race. This way the player doesn't have to lose a ton of money. Especially on that last race because yeah, it took over 10 plus tries with each run costing 50 to 100 credits depending if they persuaded the race organizer. Ultimately, we become the swoop race champion and receive a large amount of money as a reward. Subsequently, I decided to purchase a weapon since it's been a little bit and, we just have basically the starting weapons. I went with the Zabrak battle cannon since it had really good damage range of 6 to 13 alongside having an attack modifier. Now, this isn't the best weapon in the game, but will be something to help us along the way and it's definitely like, mid-tier range, I would say. Going into a submersible, we go towards the secret Republic base. Going through, we find that the Selkath here went insane from something unknown. Instead of being friendly, they will attack each other and the player if they get the chance. Progressing through the level, we learn that drilling for KOTOR, that healing agent mentioned earlier, awoken a massive shark that just seems to be controlling the other sharks and randomly has the ability to drive the Selkath insane. Some survivors in the station hypothesized the drilling machine to be disturbing the shark. This is also the point where we get one of the most boring sections of the game. Basically, the player moves at like a quarter of the normal speed and has to traverse the ocean floor. Obviously, this is more so realistic, movement speed wise, but it's terrible gameplay wise. Going up the machine, we have a couple of options. First is that we can add a toxic substance to the water, resulting in the sharks dying, but then what would be the repercussions to the surrounding environment? Second is that we could disable the drill well, but then this may have no effect at all. I opted to go with the second option since it seemed to be a more light-sided choice. Ultimately, we disable the machine, which causes the shark not to be aggressive. Passing by, and at the end, we find another star map. Leaving the Republic research post, we were ambushed by Calo Nord and some other bounty hunters. Basil got absolutely destroyed, but luckily Candaris and I were able to take him down. Getting to the embassy, we were taken away by Selkath law enforcement and are set for trial. The Selkath in the end commend us for our actions, especially since we didn't kill that large shark. Apparently, that large shark was actually important in Selkath legend. With Manon completed, we head towards Tatooine to find the next star map fragment. After landing on Tatooine and paying the docking fee, we get arguably one of the best guns in the game. His weapon has much better stats than that Zabrak blaster we acquired earlier. One benefit to using this weapon is that it can be upgraded further for increased damage and stats. Similar to Manon, there are some swoop race events that can be completed. Thankfully, this is much easier than the earlier races, so we quickly breeze through each of them. I have to say, I really enjoyed this course the most, and it reminded me of that Star Wars Episode 1 pod racing game that I used to play on the Nintendo 64. As soon as we leave the swoop race building, a bunch of these dark Jedi ambush us. This was a tough fight, not gonna lie, mostly because of how unprepared I was. One thing that really helped was training the dark Jedi like they were in COD zombies. I guess all those years doing Easter egg truly paid off. Keeping with a similar trend of absurdly difficult, we run into some Tusken warriors. It was tough because the Tuskens had shields on top of having an insane amount of health. Afterwards, there were some nearby NPCs asking us to protect them from Tusken raiders. There are multiple waves of them that come in. Both of these Tusken interactions took more than 30 minutes to complete. This was truly one of the toughest moments of the run, and I was happy to persevere through. Next, well, I became Episode 2 Anakin.
I killed them. They're dead. Every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women. And it's the men, too. They're like animals. And I slaughtered them like animals.
Yeah, we had to take down some sand people. There's a way to talk with them and resolve things peacefully, but I didn't realize how low on funds I was to purchase HK-47, the translator assassin droid. It was rather unfortunate that it did have to come to this, but we take down the Tusken leader. Now we are able to complete the Zerka Corporation questline. Subsequently, we lead some Bantha to a nearby cave to lure out a Krayt dragon. Yeah, for those that have seen The Mandalorian, this will be all too familiar with the behemoth. We had some help with a friendly NPC who actually laid mines underneath the sand beforehand, but they didn't have any means of luring the beast out of the cave. Upon defeat, we receive a Krayt dragon pearl, lightsaber crystals to sell, and lastly, another star map fragment. This is our third map piece, and so we are over halfway through the game. Returning to the Tatooine town, we sell the rewards we got from the Tuskens and the Krayt dragon. Now we are able to purchase HK-47. Now, I did feel kind of bad because I had to threaten the shop owner multiple times just to get an affordable price, but hey, what can you do? With HK-47 in our squad, we are missing only one more ally. With Tatooine completed, I was debating on where to go next. There are two options left, Kashyyyk or Korriban. I decided to leave Kashyyyk for last since I remember having difficulty in the lower force levels, so off to Korriban, one of the main Sith homeworlds. As we approach Korriban, a cutscene plays and shows Darth Malak dispatching his apprentice Darth Bandon to fight us. A pretty funny story, but I vividly remember my first playthrough thinking this dude's name was Darth Brandon. I thought to myself, yeah, this was one of the most laughable names, but thankfully it wasn't actually his name. We find that the Sith are training new recruits, but are forcing them to stand in one place, starving and dehydrated. Talking with the person overseeing the training, we asked to join the Sith Academy. Unfortunately, he isn't willing to sponsor us, so we will have to find someone else. In the cantina, we find Euthura Ban, a high-ranking Sith. Similarly, we ask if she would sponsor us for the Sith Academy, and she refuses. Later on, we find a Sith just annihilating his friends for no reason. We have to step in to stop him. Super random, but I guess it works out since we get a Sith medallion. Now if we go back to Euthura, we should be able to join the Academy. Entering the Academy, we meet the other trainees and Master Uthar. We learn how the Sith viewed the Jedi and the Force. It is interesting to see the differences in training between the Jedi and the Sith. Lastly, we are told to complete various tasks so that we may increase our reputation by doing evil deeds. Similarly to the Jedi training, we must recite the core tenets, this time with the Sith. A simple and easy task, but truly makes you feel immersed in the game. Leaving the academy and going towards the Valley of the Tombs, we are ambushed by Darth Bandon and his allies. I had a fair amount of trouble in this fight, and it took multiple attempts. I found that I could ultimately cheese Bandon by entering a nearby cave, thus losing his aggro and reviving my fallen allies. In the end though, he doesn't stand a chance. Further in that cave that I mentioned, we find Sith trainees that abandon the academy.
Slaughter these insurrectionists. Slaughter them all.
Tasked with bringing in their heads, we take them on. I did get quite nervous when I lost 2 of my characters and realized I had saved last like 30 minutes beforehand. With that in mind, I was determined to not fall in battle. Things ended up working out, which saved me some heartache if I ended up needing to restart. One of the last things I did on Korriban was going through the various tombs. There are 4 tombs in total, but I only decided to complete 3 since the 4th one's rewards would have been a melee weapon, which is not useful in this challenge. The first was going through this droid-infested tomb, and at the end, a prototype droid will ask us to help him escape. This was actually a really cool story thread in KOTOR. Basically, a Sith Master made a prototype droid with the ability to think and grow over time. Well, over time, it had appreciated life and human beings, which was the opposite of its prime initiative. Second was this tomb with a bunch of puzzles. This one was really tedious, but felt awesome once I completed it. At the end, the previous master of the Sith Academy waits for us and forces us to answer just these random questions. Depending if we get them right or wrong, this will change the player's health and the NPCs next to them. The third and final tomb I went through after completing the various Sith trials and talking with Master Uthar and Euthura. This was a damn difficult tomb to get through. First was that I needed to solve a bunch of puzzles. Second was making it past these Rancor-like creatures, and these guys were insanely tough. The cheese I found was unlocking the lever and just blasting them from the nearby room. This worked like a charm. Eventually we reached the end of the tomb and receive our Sith lightsaber, which we will never use until shortly afterwards. And we also find another star map fragment. Masters then congratulate us on reaching the end. Master Uthar commands us to kill Euthura, while Euthura explains that we teamed up to take him down. Well, at first I chose to just fight Euthura, which was a mistake, since afterwards I was low on heals and had to fight Uthar. Uthar is insanely OP, so I reloaded the save and just fought him instead. Similarly, with this choice, we have to fight both Sith Masters at the end. Ultimately, we defeat both of them, becoming the Sith Academy Master. Re-entering the Academy was filled with many hugs. Hugs, of course, coming from red lightsabers. Everyone, and I mean everyone at the Academy turned to fight me. This was easily the toughest part of Korriban as a whole. I had to do some cheesing again to make this part work. Essentially, I did that exploit I mentioned earlier, but instead of a cave, we were just going outside the Academy.
Time to abandon ship.
While this was difficult, it did make me feel like just a badass just mowing the Sith down. Leaving Korriban, we are ambushed and taken prisoner by Malak's Sith fleet. In interrogation, we learn that Malak wants to personally question us because of the history between the two of us, which is very interesting. This mission had a lot of tough moments, but most notable was the final battle with Saul. I remembered from my first playthrough having an extremely tough time in this section. There are, I believe, 8 targets the player needs to take down in this area. A few Sith troopers, Dark Jedi, and then Saul. I ended up doing a bunch of trial and error to see what would ultimately work. I found a few things that were actually quite strange. First is that enemies seem to target certain characters more so than others. I've noticed this other times throughout the game, so I decided to implement this into my next plan. Second is I need to buff myself to the max if I was going to last longer than 30 seconds. I found too often I would lose an ally soon after going through the door. Using the COD Zombies training tactics once again, we ultimately proved to be the victor. When Saul is defeated, he whispers something into Karth's ear, which sends him into a rampage. With Malak shortly arriving, we have to leave the ship before we can talk about what occurred. Ultimately, we aren't able to leave the ship in time, and Malak forces us into a confrontation. This part, well, I'll let it play for those unfamiliar, since I could not do the scene enough justice with just my words.
I hope you weren't thinking of leaving so soon, Bastila. I've spent far too much energy hunting down you and your companions to let you get away from me now. Besides, I had to see for myself if it was true. Even now, I can hardly believe my eyes. Tell me, why did the Jedi spit? As is the outcome. I am actually surprised this confrontation did not happen soon. Even the combined power of the Jedi Council couldn't keep your true identity buried forever, could it?
The Jedi do not believe in killing their prisoners. No one deserves execution, no matter what their crimes.
The The Council would not normally accept an adult for training, but this is a special case.
They say the Force can do terrible things to a mind. It can wipe away your memories and destroy your very identity.
Tatooine. Kashyyyk. Manan. Korriban. Revan visited each of these worlds searching for clues to reveal the hidden location of the Starforge.
The lure of the dark side is difficult to resist. I fear this quest to find the Starforge could lead you down an all too familiar path.
What greater weapon is there than to turn an enemy to your cause, to use their own knowledge against them?
Yep, we learned that our character is actually Darth Revan. Learning that the Jedi brainwashed and turned Darth Revan into just Revan was actually a really interesting twist. When I first played, something I did not know or expect. Because of this twist, it made me really enjoy the first game and its storytelling a lot more than I previously did. Bastila ended up sacrificing herself by fighting Malak so that we could escape. Will she become his apprentice, or will she not give in to the dark side? One of the final places we will go in KOTOR is Kashyyyk, homeworld to the Wookiees. We learned that Zalbar was actually exiled from here since he uses claws in a fight. In Wookiee culture, claws are used as tools, and if used as a weapon, shows that the Wookiee has gone mad. With this in mind, we will have to be cautious when dealing with the Wookiees. Acquiring a really good armor set that actually matches the gun we acquired, now we will have an insanely high damaging weapon on top of a high defense armor set with critical hit immunity.
Fine addition to my collection.
Talking with Zalbar's brother, we learned that he is extremely corrupt and actually forced Zalbar out so that he could take the throne. Well, now he is holding his brother hostage and forcing us to do his dirty work. In the lowest areas of Kashyyyk, we find our last ally in the game. Jolee Bindo is an unaligned Force user, but follows the teachings of the Jedi more so than the Sith. I have to say, this was one laid-back dude. We basically tell him that we used to be the Dark Lord of the Sith, and he's like, whatever. Eliminating some nearby poachers, we let Jolee join our squad. Afterwards, we can progress towards the star map. This was one of the more interesting star maps, since there is a computer terminal nearby that gives some really interesting information. I think the most notable is that Kashyyyk trees aren't native to Kashyyyk. Instead, they were imported by the builders over 20,000 years ago. There were definitely some other interesting information, so I implore you to check out the VOD's channel if you are interested. Ultimately, we find the last star map fragment. Taking down some Kinrath creatures, we use them as bait to lure out the ritual beast. This is a beast of Wookiee legend and was the beast that broke Baka's blade. Upon defeat, we are able to recover the fragmented hill. We eventually find the mad Wookiee that Zalbar's corrupt brother was talking about. He did act irrational at first, but then once we speak with him, we learn that this is Zalbar's father, who was outcast the same way that he was. We agreed to join together to hopefully overthrow his brother. Reaching the Wookiee base once again, we promised to take down Chundar, Zalbar's brother. This was a fun fight and easily one of the more memorable moments from Kashyyyk. It was a long and grueling battle, but by the end of it, we managed to defeat him. With the Wookiee's true leader returned, we are offered Baka's blade, one of the Wookiee's most important treasures. Unfortunately for us though, it's basically the equivalent of rubbish since we can't use it. Leaving Kashyyyk, we get a cutscene showing Malak brutally torturing Bastila and convincing her that she will turn to the dark side. We witness the Starforge in its terrifying power, sucking the life out of a nearby star. Thousands of Sith ships are nearby, which is both awesome yet terrifying image to witness. Unfortunately, a disruptor field and a short skirmish with Sith ships caused our ship to need repairs, so we landed on a nearby planet. On the planet, we find various Rakatan people, and there's two major tribes here. The Rakatans were the great builders long ago, but due to the civil war and the dark nature of the Starforge, they became nearly extinct. We learn this once we go through the ancient temple and find a computer in the lower levels. It talks about the history of the Rakatans and their demise. This was really interesting, and one thing I forgot when I was doing this challenge, so I was quite interested in hearing it again. At the very top of the ancient temple, we come to find out that Bastila has succumbed to the dark side and became Malak's pawn. Trying to bring her back to the light, she refuses and a battle breaks out. This fight was fairly simple and was pretty funny, but it only took one attempt. Afterwards, Bastila escapes back to the Starforge and we turn off the disruptor field. Returning to the ship, we speak with the Republic fleet and Jedi Master Vandar. After many hours of joy and pain, we get to the final quote-unquote mission, which is on the Starforge. We're tasked with destroying it and defeating Darth Malak. This area starts with the player fighting waves of droids as they progress through. Ultimately, the threat level is turned up once we reach the inner areas, and so Malik sends everything our way. This was easily the toughest mission in the whole game. Fighting wave after wave of Dark Jedi and Sith troopers is immensely difficult with blasters only. It doesn't help that the Sith troopers throw grenades like every 2 seconds. Mention near the beginning that the Sith have insane area of effect force abilities, and this just highlights how frustratingly tough it can be to overcome. I ended up spending a lot of time just in these few sections until I was able to find a winning strategy. Sooner or later we come across Bastila in the command center. This was a fun and sad fight. It was fun because she has almost 3 phases to her fight, which just adds to the chaos. These phases weren't all that difficult, instead the trouble was just managing my health, since it carried over between phases. Eventually we defeat her and she asks us to end her suffering. Instead we try to pull her back to the light. At first she was resistant, pleading to end her life. Once she saw the truth behind our words, she came back. Now she offers her battle meditation for the Republic. Bastila saved, we must stop Malik. Darth Malik, our former apprentice and leader of the Sith army, now stands before us. Running away, he quickly summons some droids, which was a minor hindrance in the grand scheme of things. The ultimate challenge truly began when I entered his arena. Having to fight Malik with just blasters and on the hardest difficulty is something I was thinking about during the entire playthrough. What will I do once I reach Malik? Will I have enough heals for the fight? Should I change my build? And so many other questions floated around in my mind. Well, before coming to the Starforge, I purchased over 99 advanced health kits, alongside making sure I had plenty of stimulant buffs. This should have been more than enough. Well, it should have. Going through the Starforge and Malik's fight, I quickly realized I was using heals much quicker than I was getting damage in. It doesn't help that Malik deals insane damage numbers and is able to heal back to full health. Yes, you heard me right, full health. Now there is a workaround to this, but since we're using blasters only and using non-aggressive force powers, we aren't able to do anything. Usually the player will use a lightsaber throw or some force ability to destroy the trapped Jedi. But like I mentioned, I can't do that. This left me with an extremely tough boss fight. I did have a few saving graces though, which was just the amount of buffs I was using. Using the highest level of Jedi force resisting abilities alongside stimulants let me get a ton of damage in and even resist some of Malik's stronger attacks. Ultimately, after a grueling battle, nearly 40 minutes later, we take down Darth Malik. Malik speaks to us before passing, questioning what would have become of him if he didn't follow us on the dark path, or if he was rescued from the ship instead of us. We try to bring him back to the light, but it's too late, and he passes away. In the end, we defeat Malik and destroy the Starforge. This has been Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic with blasters only. As final cutscenes are playing, I want to reflect on the run. This was an awesome challenge to go through. This has been something I've been wanting to do for a really long time, so I was happy to complete it. We became Jedi Master, Soup Race Champion on 3 different planets, Sith Academy Master, and so much more. We tried staying with the light side, but there were times where dark side actions were needed. This was a rather long video. Let me know down below if you enjoyed these longer videos and challenges, and if you'd like to see me do this again in KOTOR 2, or perhaps this game again but with lightsaber or melee only. That would be a really interesting one. Thank you for watching and for your support. It's been really awesome seeing everyone enjoy the past challenge runs. You guys rock. Make sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Try to do something kind for someone today, whether it's a small or large gesture. This is your boy Skilled Fawn, and I'm out.